coming in, either in terms of establishing identity or in terms of establishing document verification and so on. The second major priority for a bank today is customer experience, and the third one is unit cost reduction. Now, in all these cases, they're all kind of interlinked. I can think of several use cases where I really don't see solutions. Probably somebody in this room is going to come up with a solution around all these problems. So these are the big problem areas really. So anything which comes in which can solve for these problems that banks in particular have and many other organizations also have are going to become the killer apps. Right? And then, sorry, what was your extended?
Different views of what is possible, not possible.
You can choose to skip that because that I don't think there is a right or a wrong answer to that.
It's a very philosophical
yes.
debate there, but I think
perhaps
what Mohanty mentioned about say TCP/IP starting off as a government project. The other one again, it goes back again to your API question. So I look back at and I'm of the generation where I can remember when ATM was hot technology, and I've actually gone and implemented ATM banking in China way back, right? So it all started off as everyone having their own ATMs and every bank had its own ATM network. And then banks got together and there were consortiums which agreed on common protocols and standards for ATMs to start interoperating, and there was like an ISO 8583 document and it became formalized as a standard, and then that went in. So there are two ways in which this can evolve. One is through governments pushing, the other is as industry bodies coming together, either banks or financial industry, and making common specifications. I believe they're both happening. So that is how all this would go into the mainstream.
I have a question for the audience. Guys, one of the challenge of bank consortium coming is that there is a commercial interest behind the platform. And that's where the struggle is. When government did the TCP/IP protocol, there was no commercial interest to drive that. It was a much more a bigger social need to build a protocol which seamlessly people can talk to each other. So the challenge will be the private player consortium, how they're willing to make it open, free, and as much easy to propagate across the sector. I think that's where I will have this challenge.
Yeah, in fact, to your point, even I remember as when we were starting off, everyone said, "Oh, this internet thing is never going to take off. Everybody's going to have ISDN and X.25," and that was like the official protocol. And then it's just because TCP/IP was so easy to use and it was so easy to go into a web browser as opposed to say some kind of dial-up networking and all the X.25 which the governments kept pushing. The market naturally gravitated towards that. So again, that's why I think it's both. It's a question of government, and it's also in this case the consumers are the banks and the financial players. What is it that will be natural and easy to adopt? So putting those together is what is going to spark your killer app.
So that comment that I gave, what was that law? Amara's law, now I remember. But Bill Gates added a small part to that. And he said, we always overestimate the power of a technology in the first 2 years and underestimate in the next 10. And therefore, let us not be lulled into inaction. Right? So anyone here who is a blockchain enthusiast or a blockchain entrepreneur and stuff, don't get disheartened by the discussion. Fact of the matter is, if you don't start the action now, you will never actually get there. Let this whole discussion and the roadblocks not lull you into inaction. This is the time when you have to start for you to reap the benefits later on.
Thanks. I think those were some great discussion points, and the fact of the matter is blockchain is still all said and done in a very nascent stage, and we've seen enough technologies. Sriram alluded to ATM as being an innovative technology at some point, but we've all seen the emergence of internet and how TCP/IP became a standard protocol. So I guess blockchain has its own cycles to go through. But another related, important point that I want to touch upon, which Mohanty kind of gave a good segue to, is the whole idea of the commercialization and economics of blockchain. And this question I will specifically target to Sriram and to Umang from their banking or banker hats. I know, Umang, you're no longer there, but still, put on that hat for a moment. As they say, you can never take, a city out of a person. You can take a person out of. So let's, make it generic to a bank. But there is a lot of, some healthy skepticism as well. Some people ask this question. In fact, today itself I read a report from BCG which was titled blockchain hope or hype. I've heard people and some very senior people, including folks from the government in Singapore, ask this question of is blockchain a solution in search of a problem rather than the other way around? Is it a case of the cart before the horse? So the idea, apart from all the technological, philosophical and protocol challenges, from a commercialization standpoint and putting on your banker's hats, tell us at what point do you foresee the tipping point will come in, and what makes sense for a bank to shed its old legacy system, whatever we may call it. It's still functional, it's slow, it's archaic, but it's still there. At what point do the economics of blockchain start making sense? And I think that again will be important for the budding or prospective entrepreneurs here to understand how do they talk the language of banks in terms of the commercialization model. So far there's been a lot of discussion around technology, but why would a bank go down that path and really, and I'm talking beyond POCs or pilots, just moving to that system? Is it going to happen organically? Will there be some trigger points? How and where will the economics of it make sense? And remember, we've seen how EMB, Visa and Master have been trying to drive that for the last 10 years, and every time the deadlines get missed despite financial incentives. So just share a little more about the economics of that.
Yeah, I think, anything which, speaking as a person in a bank, anything which is going to A, reduce my unit cost, and B, is going to help me be more satisfy regulation in an easier or less costly manner. Anything which will, a solution which can help in that space is something that you would definitely jump at. If it can be scaled across geographies, that's even better, because if it works for Singapore but it will not work, say, in Malaysia, will not work in Thailand, that may be a small siloed thing. Anything which can scale across geographies and is also going to help me either reduce my unit cost or make my processes more efficient is something that will certainly classify as a tipping point.
Thanks, Sriram.
How many of you here remember the movie Wall Street? No? Michael Douglas. There's one very famous quote from that movie, which is what drives Wall Street. And I'm using Wall Street as a basic generic term for banking in general across the world. Greed and fear. Okay. I'm out of the industry. I now get a chance. Okay, I'm out of a particular bank, but I'm not out of the industry because I work with many more banks now. And it is very clear that many banks are doing what they're doing and trying to get into do what they're doing, not because of greed, but because of sheer fear. It's true. What's the thing called? FOMO. Fear of missing out. I don't do this today. My next door neighbor will do this. I will lose customers. I will do this. And therefore, they're willing to put down the money, the effort and stuff. They're willing to even partner because, okay, if I partner, at least, whatever we do it together. So my next door neighbor is not going to gain a unfair or an extremely large advantage. A large part of some of this stuff, as long as it is in the private domain, unlike the TCP/IP stuff and stuff which came from the government, if it does not come as legislation, a lot of it will be driven not by one event or by something that triggers it, but by the sheer fear that if I don't, somebody else will, and I will lose out. I see this more and more in discussions that I have with banks, and this is not just about blockchain, it is about the entire fintech space in general.
Interesting perspective, and of course FOMO is there as a key driver, but the fact of the matter is, we spoke about consortiums. We've seen R3 going through its own challenges. So I guess, again, it's very, very early days. Consortiums are being formed. Consortiums are being, I won't say unraveled, but certainly they are undergoing upheaval. So only time will tell what shape or form it takes. I'm told we don't have time for too many other questions, but I certainly want to ask another question to HH, and I had promised, the organizers that we have a VC in our midst. We want to hear from him. What is it that a VC looks for in an interesting startup? So let's talk about the money, and related to that, is there a formula for success, or is it a science or an art? How do you evaluate a good investment? Tell us some insider stories, please.
Okay, I think the short answer is whether it's a science or an art. At the very early stage, seed stage, it's art and it's almost fortune telling. At the late stage, it becomes a little bit more science, but there's still a measure of fortune telling and art in it as well. I think the first thing when I get asked this question a lot, obviously as a VC, but the thing is that all VCs are different. So each of us have our own different investment thesis. Each of us have our own biases. In fact, each of us have our own different characters, different experiences. So all I can tell you is what is our probably my organization's investment thesis, and excuse me, and it's actually pretty simple. Sort of break down into, at the very early stage companies, we can sort of break it down into three key areas. The first is, are you solving a profitable problem? I think this has been alluded to by some of the other panelists. All startups solve a problem, but is that problem profitable? That's very important. You can solve a problem, but it's going to make you like 1 cent, and you're going to get billions of customers before you can make money. It's not going to work out for a VC. He's going to look at, just do some simple projections back of the envelope, and he's going to say, okay, I think this is not going to work for me. The second is, what is the customer willing to pay you for it? So the customer's got to look at a lot more than just, hey, I'm going to save this number of people and all that. What's the implication of the change? Have you identified that? Are you cognizant of the fact that change is never easy for big organizations? That if they're going to switch to a blockchain-based system, what kind of systems do they have to pull out of the ground and change? What kind of cultural changes need to be made within the organization for people to adapt to the new system? What is the possible ramifications to customer service? There are a whole bunch of questions that they are going to ask themselves, which you need to also think about before you are able to approach your customers. And as VCs, these are things that, because we are also part of the finance sector, we sometimes, as part of our due diligence, we'll pick up the phone and call some of our people in the banking sector and say, what do you think about this? And they will tell you, hey, this ain't going to fly. Yes, you're going to save me 50% of manpower, but at the other extreme, my customer service is going to suffer, the system doesn't work, I'm exposed to regulatory risk, I'm exposed to a bunch of other things. And then slowly you're going to get what they call a Dear John letter from the VC saying, no, thank you for the time, we regret to inform you that after looking at a thing, so on and so forth, how that particular system ends. So, so basically, that probably could be generated by AI now. But when you move on, then after that, if you are able to overcome these two hurdles, the third question the VC for early stage companies will ask is, why you? Are you able to execute on this fantastic vision that you have? You want to go out and tackle all the banks, you want to adopt blockchain technology. What is your background? Is your background in blockchain? Have you any experience in it? Do you have any banking experience? You want to go to handle, you want to change the entire back office of a bank. Do you have any banking back office experience? If you have only done front office, work, experience all front office, and no one in your company has any of that experience, then we would probably look a little bit more carefully and probably not so favorably on that particular investment. So I'm just giving you the investment thesis for early stage companies. Obviously, at the later stage, there are other considerations that come in. We look at traction, we look at the global market sizing and all that. But at the very early stage, these are the kind of questions that most VCs would ask themselves. And the different VCs, based on what I just told you, the way in which they think and all that will sort of be permutations along these lines as well. Thanks.
Thanks, HS. And there are many questions we have on this, but I know we are running out of time. So quick 30-second more on that. 2017 and 2018 from your perspective for FinTech, bullish or bearish? Tell us honestly.
I'm neutral, actually.
Very diplomatic answer. Thanks for that. And we unfortunately have to wind up. So quick 1 minute closing remarks from each of the panelists. 5 years and 10 years from now, where do you see FinTech and financial services? We'll start with you. Let's keep the momentum going.
I'm sorry, you're saying?
5 and 10 years from now, future of money, future of FinTech. Your 1 minute overview of the future.
Actually, while I may be neutral in the next couple of years because of all the changes, the political changes that are taking place, I'm actually pretty bullish in the next 5 years that some of the technologies that every time there is a kind of recession, or every time there is some economic downturns or potential downturns, that's when banks sometimes get their act together and say, hey, let's try something different, let's try to push the boundaries. That was one of the reasons how I sold my company in the very early 2000s. We were in data mining and it was pretty greenfield at that time. So I think that I'm hoping that this will be another period, and this will get technologies like blockchain, AI will gain a wider acceptance, where banks will actually give it a try simply because they've run out of people to fire and they still need to maintain a minimum operating hall.
Thanks, Ajay. Umang, the world of financial services in 2025.
5 years from now, I think everything it'll gain momentum, and there will still be a lot of focus. But I genuinely believe 10 years from now, there will be no word fintech. It'll just be so mainstream. It'll just be part of it, so day-to-day life that there will be no separate concept of fintech, and that is what eventually it has to get to. And that's what people have to look for. So 5 years from now, still pretty much the same, but 10 years, completely part of mainstream, part of the banking industry, in a sense. And obviously, I see a lot more collaboration versus this entire thing about they're going to eat the bank's lunch, they're going to eat the insurer's lunch and stuff like that. There's going to be a lot more collaboration and cooperation than there's going to be competition.
Thanks. Bruce, what will it
I think
2025,
yeah.
2030?
Yeah, like 10 years from now, I guess fintech will be just like the autonomous cars. It probably will be mixed